All right, well, we're live. I'm live, Pyrrho here with Jesus, the Zombie Picture Show, and I decided just we just come in and play this by ear. So I don't really have anything I was for sure going to talk about. There's various things, and we got we got all kinds of stuff. But
Okay.
I did think a little bit about some questions. So I don't know if you want to say hello, or if maybe you have an agenda. We could always follow an agenda
I
of
don't have any
yours.
agenda.
You sure? Doesn't
Yeah, I don't have any
everybody?
agenda. No. Yeah, the only thing is, yeah, you probably seen my what is it? I forgot what video I did. How to pronounce my name correctly is Jesus.
Oh, okay, no, I missed that
Uh,
one.
no, it's cool.
Well, you've been making videos not so frequently, so I have so many subscriptions that
Yeah,
it's easy for me to miss if somebody's making a video every
yeah,
couple
totally,
weeks.
totally,
But I caught up
totally.
with some of your videos recently, but I think it
Okay.
was probably 6 or 8 months since the time
Yeah, since
that I was seeing every single one. And it's kind of like and this is one reason I want to make software with a better subscription system, because
okay,
basically if I see one person's video, then I go, oh yeah, let's see what else they made recently. But if I miss it because at the frequency, because like I subscribe to some of the universities
okay.
or AP, and
Yeah,
they'll put out 5 or 10, and it's just like, and if I don't see one in
it's
there,
ridiculous. Yeah,
yeah, it's hard for me to remember to go
yeah.
and check. So I think I've fallen a little out of touch with what's going on with your stuff. As I told you when I was talking to Das Spook, he mentioned, "Oh, get it. Why don't you get in touch with Zombie Picture Show, because that'd be good." And I thought, yeah, that would be good. I've had some questions for you
Mhm.
before that I think could probably best or only be answered. Um, and I mean, basically, that would be this misanthropic thing,
Oh, okay.
because yeah,
Yeah.
and I could give you. I mean, and I just noticed when I was sending you the message, because you
Hmm.
sent many things, but I forget whether it was on your Google Plus or which one,
Okay.
where you actually qualified it. Like, not really, but sort of just don't care for the masses. But so, what's the deal with that? Because it is true, you don't strike me as a misanthrope, but you make a big point of that being part of the language that
Well,
you've
the thing
developed
is
about
that
here.
it's not a lot of times misanthropes are qualified, or the meaning or the definition behind misanthropy or misanthrope is having hatred for the masses. But it's not the case with me. I have a lot of disappointment with the masses. Uh, Case in point, for example, say Gary, he takes pride in, for example, like the wordage, the verbiage that's being used. Um, uh, Different words. For example, once, case in point, some antinatalists use suffering like it's going out of style. Use that word suffering like it's going out of style without the actual concept of what suffering actually is, or how suffering it's could be a different meaning for different people. It's not classified as suffering is this and only this, but it's seen as it's a whole spectrum of emotions.
Mhm. Well, what about this part of I mean, are you saying that you don't think, or not are you saying, but is it a part of your view then, uh, with respect to, you know, human beings, that we, like the word means to hate people, but it can
Yes,
also be pessimism about people, right? Like there's
exactly.
sort of a hopelessness to the,
Is disdain for, or rather, disappointment for the masses, not able to learn from your mistakes. For example, sorry or apology for me has a that's a it's a big issue for me because you cannot be sorry of something you did because you intended to do that. See, you can never be sorry that you did that. You could be apologetic of the consequences that your actions had when you took those actions to, and you had that the consequent is to that the consequent that reaction that was made by your
Mhm.
actions caused discomfort for a lot of people, and but you still intended to do that.
Hmm.
Your actions speak of intent. So and that's a lot. That's what I have against the masses is that instead of just speaking from just concentrating on what you feel and then acting upon those feelings, is think for a minute. Actually, think for a minute what you're about to do, and think of the consequence that that might have, and think of different scenarios from from different choices that you might take for this particular action. There's all these choices that you could take to improve the outcome or to soften the discomfort for other people. So,
Yeah, I kind of feel with apologies, often people have make too much about the apology about receiving forgiveness when they should be thinking about, what they can do to mitigate something. Like a lot of
yeah.
times, if you talk about reparations, people are, they get caught up in the, well, I can't feel guilty about that, or that wasn't
Hmm.
even me, that was an ancestor. And it's really like, well, you can actually take some responsibility from your ancestors without feeling guilty, and the guilt might not help in the first place if you were just focusing on what you could do to make things better now. But in terms of
Exactly.
being sorry, because I have always had similar problems with apologies and what they really mean.
Mhm.
But I do think, or what do you think about that you can make an apology if it means that you're going to try to do what you just said. So, okay, I did something, it was intentional, I'm taking responsibility, I
Yeah.
can't change that or pretend it was an accident. But what I can do is make sure that in the future I don't do the same kind of thing. I
Or
don't
at
make the
least
same.
try to explain your actions. Now, or for me, apologies, it's a big issue for me. At least don't say sorry. Just explain to me what you did that. What was
Hmm.
the reason behind your actions?
Right, I would
And
rather know that too. Yeah.
exactly, exactly, right. I
Yeah.
It's like, oops, I cheated. Well, yeah. Well, explain to me why you cheated. All right,
Yeah.
it's it's the it's the action behind the intent. It's the what drove you to that intent.
Or I find people will apologize to me, and I'm like, I don't want sorry. I want you to listen to what I'm saying right now.
Exactly, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
But so okay. Well, what about the on the antinatalism thing? Because you've always been present in the antinatalist
Yeah.
sort of thing. But and I would say that a lot of people that would self-ascribe as antinatalists, there's a
Hmm.
wide breadth of different actual positions. If I was making the catalog of philosophy,
Hmm.
the antinatalists do not all go in one section heading. In
Exactly,
fact,
exactly,
nobody goes in just one section heading. Everybody has all
exactly.
different kinds of descriptions.
Different
But even
spectrum.
though there is a cohesiveness to that message, I noticed there's a lot of different attitudes towards it, and you see
Hmm.
it with people sometimes kind of breaking away or I always think of it as fidea.
Uh-huh.
But but you in particular, I think, would be somebody that definitely has your own
Well, I have my own brand of.
version of it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I've called myself many times. I'm a Malthusian antinatalist. In that respect, that, for example, with me, it's always take responsibilities for your actions. If, for example, if you're below means of your economic status, don't bring another being into this existence. Because,
Hmm.
hey, you're suffering. I mean, well, rather, you're having difficulty in what you're making. Why bring another being into that existence with you so
Hmm.
he could actually, yeah, it'll be difficult. I mean, just take a look at the economic status right now for every kid. Every kid, you will end up spending during his lifetime from age baby into an adult, to 18 years old, say. I mean, you will end up spending roughly about half a million on him, and that's huge. If you're not making, well, somewhat a decent wage, then think about, okay, I'm only gonna I'm responsible in saying I want a kid because blah blah blah, whatever the reason, have a kid, but just one. Because
Yeah.
again, kids, you and both and I know that kids
Yeah.
cost money. It's hugely expensive, And not a lot of people take that responsibility. Hence, I mean, just take a look at the welfare status that we have. It's increasing.
Yeah, it's definitely a concern. I mean, and I'm a liberal that believes in all of those programs. I'm fine with paying taxes and the rest, and yet it's getting a little bit out of hand. But here,
Exactly.
well, so for my example, then, I mean, I had gotten, I worked my way through college, so I had,
Hmm.
been able to feel like I knew how to make a living for a while, and I got a
Exactly.
job that at the time, it didn't pay fantastically great, but I was a philosophy
Yeah.
major, and I'd had my first commercial job, and I'd already had several jobs working in the research, whatever public
Hmm.
sector you want to call scientific, programming for scientific research.
Hmm.
So in a way, it was my first job, and it was great. It was in games. I thought
Okay.
that I
Cool.
would work on that forever. It was online games. I wanted to simulate virtual societies. I wanted that kind of
Hmm.
game and Sim City kind of games, so that I kind of felt like, hey, we had the American experiment. It's sort of expensive to have experiments in whole societies. What about virtual
Exactly.
societies? So anyway, I had this pie in the sky idea. It was great what I was doing. Materially, I was set up enough. I was lead programmer to think, okay, I can take care of these kids materially in terms of money. On the
Hmm.
other hand, my relationship that I was in was crazy, and I did know it. I knew it was crazy. The
Hmm.
crazy part for me was that I would help her learn to be happy, and like I had
Exactly.
been, and we would deal with these issues as it's an anger management issue, and I made various excuses, all of which I knew. I'm of a
Yeah.
generation that I was told, at least given a little bit warning about this. I knew better. On the other hand, you have your hormones, and it's like you believe in fate, and whether you really
Yeah.
think you do or not, you have these feelings, you react to them, you commit and say it's forever, and it's supposed to be forever. Anyway,
Hmm.
bottom line is, I was not. I thought I had made this decision that I could
Yeah.
do it, but I had just what is uh, I want to say pie in the sky. That's it.
Yeah.
Hopes that
Hopes.
I should have known better then, even at the time.
Hmm.
Without the extra information of now knowing, yes, I should have known better. I mean, at the time.
Exactly. See.
And so, what are you going to do? Because you can't. On the other hand, I can't be entirely faulted for I was 27,
Yeah.
and for the youth of 27. Um, Thinking I could solve those problems. You
Hmm.
go into life with problems, and then you tackle them. You start thinking, yeah, let's tackle the important ones. It's an I don't know. Part of my thing with antinatalism is I don't know how you would stop people from having those kinds of reactions. It's easy to be 45 and
Hmm.
go back, or even 35, but you're 19, you have a circumstance.
Yeah.
How are you going to be? What does it even mean to make a rational decision sometimes at that point?
Exactly. It's all about growing as you age. For example, yeah, you mentioned I was, I did well. I did surprisingly well economically. I did surprisingly well, but I fell in that emotional stance because I was never around. I was always traveling, trying to make more, trying to provide more, bigger, better, whatever. So I fell in that. I fell in that. Well, shit. It was like I was a I was an absent father. It was an absent husband. So, but I always thought, what if they're taken care of, well, it's fine with me. It's fine with
Mhm.
me because I'm always traveling. I'm always doing this. I'm always taking care of
Right.
business. But yeah, I fell at that aspect of, just being a family man, a true family man.
Hmm.
Yeah, and you get to think about that. It's like shit. It was you, for me, the first time I actually thought about this, well, maybe I should have, just told my ex that to not have it, to abort. But at the same time, it's faith, it's religion, it's believing in something. For example, my ex is Buddhist, extremely faith, and she doesn't believe in harming anything. So again, that was a huge downfall on my part, I guess. That's what I thought back then. But now I'm glad we had her and
Hmm.
whatever. But the thing is that I still think back days that I should have just maybe just served 8 years, 12 years, and just whatever, and then not 20 like I did. But
Hmm.
Yeah, because I didn't think like that. I didn't think like, well, she needs a father, she
Yeah.
needs love, and yeah. So you get to think now. You get to think, well, I should have done that. I should
Yeah.
have done that.
Well, but I'm on the other side, just as a balance to that. And I mean, not as even a philosophical thing, but like
Yeah.
man to man sort of situation of the irony is I'm in the other situation,
Yeah.
um, where I was doing really well in my career, but later on, around 34, and I realized that this wasn't going to work, and I could not. I had been homeschooling my daughter while I was working, but I was doing a lot of work, but I was around. I didn't have to
Yeah.
travel. Well, I did travel some, but I mean, I wasn't always
Hmm.
away or that kind of thing. And so, and I realized, so I was trying to do this balance where I was there every day and I was reading the kids' stories every night and I was staying involved. But I did believe that the provider thing, it doesn't have to be
Hmm.
the man, but fine
Yeah.
if it is, and it feels good to do that. But I realized, oh, this wasn't going to work emotionally, and I could not leave this in my ex-wife's hands. And so I left my career and went to Hawaii, where I might not have gotten a job. Luckily, yeah, I was applying for jobs as I went over there, but there are
Hmm.
literally only a few jobs
A
over
few
there
jobs.
well, at all, but
Uh-huh.
also in my particular kind of field. And it was almost like 10 years getting a divorce over there. It
Mm.
took me 3 years till we got divorced because
Yeah.
of various things that happened, and then it took another 3 years until we separated. I mean, and another
Hmm.
I think 2.5 years till I started the procedures, and then it took
Hmm.
like 4 years to actually get the divorce because she drug her feet and fought about it and stuff. Even though we had no, I mean, just the kids to separate, and that was already pretty clear, but more or less just to stretch things out. And so I ended up realizing I could have gone through that,
Hmm.
and I mean, because I just gave up a ton. My salary when I did get the job was half as much,
Hmm.
and I was in a really hard way, and it just pinned me in. I would have been better off being the just provider dad, and when I
Hmm.
would have done the divorce, having money to go ahead and finish it and compartmentalize it, and I didn't want, I thought, well, if I'm a single dad, then I don't want to hire babysitters, so I came to Hawaii for family, and that didn't really work out or connect
Hmm.
or end up being a reality. So, there were problems on that front. And so, well, I just took too much time basically saying I've kind of felt the other way. Like I did drop out of my career
Yeah.
and to focus on
Family.
being a dad, and that wasn't
Hmm.
necessary, and I have a lot of sympathy for dads that have to travel around, because I do think that I sort of raised in a 70s era where you men they take it on the chin about, oh, don't work so much and stuff. And
Hmm.
I never really felt that way, but I definitely don't now. I think, it is, and it doesn't have to be the man, but any parent that has to focus on providing a living in this particular world,
Exactly.
um, is to be applauded. And the people that have more time should, yeah, try to, quantity is important too, but if you don't have the quantity, then it would be nice if there was a support environment of other people that help it be
Exactly.
quality. So anyway, you could go both ways. And I think the thing is, of course, if you lose a child, you're gonna definitely know things you could do different, and things that
Exactly.
have to do with that, or things that are just incidentally related. In my case, very directly related, because the decisions that I have gone through, both made and let be made for me and stuff. In my case, I mean, directly led
Hmm.
to the problem. So but you were one of the people that really helped. I was kind of like, should I mention this on YouTube? I don't
Hmm.
usually do personal things, but I couldn't just pretend that it hadn't happened, right? And people knew I had two daughters and stuff. And but your reply to me was one of the ones that made it feel like, not just like, well, I got to do it because I can't be dishonest or fake about, oh, nothing happened and just go on,
Right.
but as an actual positive thing, because then you had mentioned that you had lost a child, and that and what it was like for you, and that was actually really important in my attitude there. And I remember, I think you said, well, the first thing is I was an alcoholic for a year, and I was drinking less and less up to that point. I didn't have any alcohol in the house. I hadn't drunk, but for a few days, but I was drinking every few days, and certainly by the weekend kind of thing. So some people's standard. And then but after that, I thought, well, I should just continue that. I shouldn't. That's good for me personally, but that isn't what happened. And I did. I mean, I drank for that year enough that. I needed to drink every day. Like if I didn't drink, then I
Yeah,
wanted to go get a
memories
drink.
creep.
So
Yeah, exactly. Memories creep. And like you said, divorce is really hard. I mean, it takes a huge chunk of you. It
yeah,
takes everything from you, and yeah, your wife will drag her feet, and you will drag your feet because you don't want the remainder family member that you do have. You don't want them to subject them to that level of discomfort or
yeah,
that level of pain. So you try your hardest not to fight, because once you fight, then your your family or your daughter, your son
mhm,
senses that, and you're like, well, fuck, I don't want to do that to them. I don't want to do that to her. So
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
so it's really, really hard.
yeah. In my case, though, see, this is where my regrets are. Is that I took that approach. I was still told that I was keeping my daughters from their mother, which was the opposite. I was telling them to stay in contact. And in the end, I wish I would have just cut off contact. But in my childhood, there was things like that, like my dad kidnapped me and my mom kept me in Berlin, and they played what I call stupid parent tricks, and I didn't want to do that. On the other hand, I think that it is possible now. I mean, maybe this is just me being burnt speaking, but or even bitter or something. Sadly, uh, tragic for someone to believe, but I now think that you know people can just be a bad influence. Just the fact that you're a biological parent of someone doesn't mean that everybody around should like celebrate your involvement with that
Exactly.
child's life, regardless of what it actually is. But
Yeah, and I take that stance that not every parent should be a parent. If you're having
yeah,
difficulty in your life, you shouldn't be a parent because you're going to subject your kids to that. And yeah, and divorce is really hard, and sometimes it takes years just to get that, just that hump across. And
see, the thing is with
yeah.
your going back, I mean, this is making me unravel all these thoughts, but
Hmm.
going back to that trail. So, in terms of your version of antinatalism, though, the way you stated it, you didn't necessarily get to this like a general policy
Yeah,
of nobody should have kids, right? I could almost be an antinatalist if it was just a matter of think twice. And for example, there's this pressure to have kids that's ridiculous. We need to knock that out. People
yeah.
should be just you don't need to ever have kids. That would be good. But where are you on the overall, like, is it for you a position that the human race should morally just stop it altogether?
Well, for me, it's more of a taking responsibility for your actions,
Right.
taking responsibility for everything that you are. For example, if you're having a hard time, why bring another kid into this existence or another being into this existence?
Hmm.
And that's my stance. So I take the Malthusian approach, if you will, like population overgrowth, if you will. But yeah, and it's all about resources as well, because not resources are finite.
Hmm.
They are not going to last forever. So why bring kids into that sort of scenario that hey, there's almost nothing left, right? So
Yeah.
why bring that into this
So
situation?
what
But at the
about
same
the?
time,
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
if you could actually take care financially and emotionally of another being, then by
Like
all
emotion.
means. But just have one, because again, if you have two, then creates civil rivalry and all that bitterness. And yeah, we don't all like our brothers. We
And
don't
how
all
can
like our sisters.
How can you even know if you can do it emotionally? I mean, that almost, to me, it would be one of the most solid arguments for a general antinatalism. I don't buy this better never to have been logical thing. I
Exactly.
think
That's
there's
just
logical errors. But if you say, hey, if you can afford it financially and emotionally, then do it. Well, how can you know that? Right, because
Well,
you could be really
yeah,
rich and lose it, but let's say you're so rich you're never going to go down to starvation because there's bank accounts and unless the
yeah,
whole society falls. But emotionally, no, almost nobody's in a place to really, especially if they haven't even had kids yet, because that'll
yeah.
throw a whole new emotional curveball on you. You think you're
Of
just going to be
course.
this way, and then your kid
Yeah.
says this, and you're like, what?
Well, yeah, it's almost impossible to know that. Yeah, to know that. Well, nobody knows how to be a parent, and just to get that, the hardest thing is being emotionally supportive, being emotional. Like, for example, your daughter will tells you something, and you're like, "Fuck, that was fucked up," or she gets heartbroken for the first time. You feel enraged, you feel pissed off. I mean, because you don't know how to help that. You can tell, well, this is how I handle it, but it's her issue. She's going through that alone. It's her experience. But still, it's really, really hard to sort of to actually know what to do in that scenario. It's good to sympathize and empathize, but at the same time, is your empathy or sympathy real, or just making her feel better? I guess what kids really try to do is try to make you understand that this is what's going on with me, and please understand that. I'm not asking you for your opinion, just listen to me. And after I finish speaking, then you might give me a suggestion. I'm not going to say I'm going to listen to you because kids never do at times, but it's thrown out there. It's hard to be involved emotionally because there's no handbook to how do you do that, and how if something happens, how can you deal with your kids? How can you know that you are going to be emotionally responsible or just emotionally available for them? It's
Mhm.
hard. It's, because the economy is easy. The economy is like, okay, I could take care of a kid, that's fine, but emotionally, it's really hard. And if you're, for example, if you're upper class, then yeah, it's hard to be emotionally. At times, it's hard to be emotionally available because if you are upper class, then you know you're going to have to business trips here, business trips there, so you're not going to be emotionally available. So
Yeah.
it's harder. So
Yeah, and it's funny too because if you take the provider route and make enough money, then your child is going to notice the lack of actual personal time with you more. And this is
exactly.
where I think this cliche has come from, and it's grain of truth, right? And yet it's sort of unfair because there's a lot of people, they have to. There's lawyers doing great, fancy
Mm-hmm.
houses. They have to. They're paid. They might not literally be paycheck to paycheck. Might have a little bit of a cushion, but basically you just get up at that altitude of financial stability and you have to keep going. So making that decision of, hey, I'll blow this meeting or I'll have to throw this client off my client list, that's not an easy thing because you're looking at like the heart attack or a
Mm-hmm.
cardiac arrest in your system of making money, and yet to everybody else it's going to look like just pure greed. And I actually, as even as a progressive and a liberal and I don't know, wealth distribution uh, philosopher, I have a lot of sympathy actually for that situation, including people, basically anybody that has to work for a living. If you're making a lot of money but you actually have to work, you're not just collecting money your whole life because it was
Mm-hmm.
started in a bank account.
Yeah,
I have a lot of sympathy with the decisions that you have to make in terms of trading off time, people you love, and
exactly.
jobs you may or may not love, but have to do. So,
It's
but
like that old quote, if you don't work, you don't eat. Yeah,
yeah,
it's it's
I've always had that guy because I agree with you a lot on this taking responsibility thing. So with human beings, though, do you think that human beings can learn to take, you know, responsibility in the way you're thinking of it, um,
well, based
or is it
on what we know,
lost cause?
based on, for example, based on anecdotal evidence on the news that goes on, and the irresponsibility of kids, shooting, that's parent responsibility to actually just be with them, or emotional to teach them that that is not okay. So I see that as a fail on the grander scale of humans not actually taking responsibility for their own actions. For
Mm,
example, oh, I there were voices in my head, or society sucks, and I was bullied, so I took action, and I
mhm.
accidentally shot. I mean, people don't take responsibility for their actions because, again, some parents don't teach kids to take responsibility for their actions.
Yeah, or just in general. Well, it's funny. There's just many things to that because it made me think about, well, like, what if both parents have to go out and provide her? Then we're in another complicated situation because there's no backup. But I was thinking also, you know how with this Iraq war flare up or this Iraq
Mhm.
thing right now, once again, you have the parade of experts, half of whom were in the Bush administration and should be taking, they could still be talking about it, but they're not even being called on the fact of, but
Exactly.
remember how wrong you got the last time? And
Mhm.
so, and they're just treated like experts. I mean, if they went into the mistakes, they'd be able to say, yeah, I made this mistake, but I did this right, or understood that, or even
Mhm.
explain the mistakes. Well, we all thought this,
See, the
but they
thing, the
don't even
thing,
go over it. It's like, we're not even going to touch that, let alone take responsibility. We're not
yeah.
even going to touch that, that it even happened.
Well, we know that wars are extremely profitable for the upper class. They're extremely profitable, so there's always going to be wars because there's never going to be the upper class that actually don't understand what's actually going on or the reasons why the oppressed continue to uprise and we're sick of this. And the military goes in and is like, well, that's not okay. So it's
What do you think of well, I almost said original, but that would be the Daddy Bushes. What do you
oh
think
god.
of? Yeah, well, let's go start at that one. What did you? Because you have a military expertise, right? So,
Mhm.
and everybody has an opinion. But on the other hand, if this is a topic you don't want to touch, I'm sure you'll just say I don't want to. But what do you think about those the Iraq War, the first one with the George the First,
Uh,
and with the second one at the time?
mhm.
Did you support either one of those or both of those? I don't remember you ever talking about it, but you probably have.
No, I don't. I don't support. I don't support. But at the same time, it's what you were. When I joined the military, I didn't expect to like, hey, like, hey, I'm just aching to start, for them to call me and yeah, like,
Yeah.
hey. So yeah, I didn't support that because it could have easily been avoided if they would have actually talked. Yeah. And one of the things that wars, for example, a war has to be like approved by the Geneva Convention, and apparently it was because again the UN thought, hey, this could be profitable, and that's it's like conspiracy theory, but yeah, war is extremely profitable for the
I don't
upper
even think that
class.
is a conspiracy theory. I think that's just a study of history. I mean, I don't think
Exactly.
there's any conspiracy about it. I
Hmm.
mean, and actually, it's funny how could the whole conspiracy theory idea that could be hung around people's necks. It's just kind of funny because there is more than a few grains of truth in there. You know, you get this Illuminati stuff, and they talk about the Rothschilds. Well, he really did send his kids around. They really did fund both sides of the war. It really is a
Exactly.
gambit. And guess what? There's a protection racket, from the mob or
Hmm.
gangs in LA and New York too.
Hmm.
It works. There is people have
It
schemes, con
works
men have cons.
exactly.
There's ones that work with violence and funding. So it's really kind of an interesting thing because the bankers are, you like to blame, oh, it's the oil men because there's oil over there. Really,
Hmm.
when you taste that back to where the money is, what it is this idea of that people can go to war on credit, and the
Exactly.
banks give the credit to both sides and invest in the arms
Hmm.
manufacturers. And what are you going to do? What are you going to make a law saying, oh, we can't go into a deficit? We can't.
Exactly.
We have a balanced budget in amendment in our country, so we just got attacked. We're not going to borrow money. We're not
Yeah.
going to accept a loan to build guns and protect
Yeah,
yourself.
but
Of
at the
course
same
you are.
time,
There's no.
yeah, yeah, but at the same time, China lends money to the United States every freaking day, and
That's
just
weird.
to fund the things. And in exchange, we're running out of gold, but in exchange, China has all the gold now.
Yeah.
It's incredibly. It's, it's all for commodities. It's all for
Well, that's
commodities.
another thing you seem to know a lot about is Asia. And
Hmm.
so an interesting thing to me is that first of all, when talking about China, I don't consider China just like prima facie what we've known about,
Hmm.
or even the communist era China.
Hmm.
I think you got to look back at this civilization that existed when the Romans did, and what it was a reaction to their current politics. And here's an
Okay.
example: this investment and propping up of the West. I mean, a Western thinker in the Chinese position would have pulled the rug out, done the follow-up punch a long time ago. Whereas with Chinese strategy, what little I do understand of like thinking like go and this kind of approach, which I don't understand too well, um, it's like they're communists that had this idea that how we can actually subvert them and how they can't say no to us is we'll buy their bonds and support their debt. And we'll get in the banker's position. And they're going to have that. By the time they pull out that debt, it's going to be too late. By the time they do that, it'll just, whatever happens,
Hmm.
happens. And I'm not sure it'll ever happen. I don't think they're doing it in order to pull out the rug and make a big killing in the money. No, it's this actual thing of they know that having that relationship means we're not invading China anytime soon, no matter what.
Yeah, before back then it was about the money, and now it's about just commodities. It's about who has the most commodities and what this commodities actually do and who needs more of these commodities. And apparently, we all
Well,
need
and China's going to
commodities.
stop sharing these commodities, right? Aren't they kind
Exactly.
of slowing down, like the rare
Yeah.
earths for all our iPhones? The tap's getting turned off. Where are we gonna
Hmm.
we're gonna strip mine Nevada again or something? Because they've basically got all of that stuff in their economy. Now they're like, hey, we're going to use it for our manufacturers.
Exactly. Yeah,
What are we going to do?
it's interesting. It's interesting.
Do you think China could become a democracy? Because this is the thing about historically, you look at the long view of politics, and you had the Opium War, and I see sort of this, communism sort of learning something from the West to go ahead and fight the West, which to me
Hmm.
means that, you know what, there could come some year that the Tiananmen Square thing happens and it is democracy, or it could even evolve into that. I mean, it looks at the way they've absorbed capitalist principles. I've
Yeah.
never seen any other communist cultures actually absorb the market principles the way.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
who knows market better than China? Really, if you think about the
Yeah.
markets and the way, and it's always been about trade with China, going back to the
Hmm.
Roman times.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, I could see waking up some, maybe not morning, but some generation, and they're the example of democracy. They go ahead and pass us from behind. We tried to, the British tried to slow them down with opium, and they're like, okay, and they're going to catch up and zip by us, including in terms of freedom, not in
Yeah.
terms of, having some totalitarian state forever.
Yeah, the thing about China is they're always expanding and they're always learning how to do new things. So yeah, I could see China as being the great example of democracy. But
Could
as we
evolve
stand
into
right
that.
now, yeah, as we stand now, it's like they say, communism works there because it keeps a level playing field between what is owned and what the actual people could produce for the government.
But they're totally
And
converting any kind of communism that it was. They're obviously converting
of
into
course, it's a
an
lot more.
authoritarian. I mean, if anything, it's going to go through fascism because they basically have this free market and letting the billionaires grow, but then the state is in control and intervenes with that. And
Exactly.
that's like kind of the corporatocracy idea, because sure, the state is an autocrat, but no, not really, because there's this feudalism of companies. If you let companies and individuals become really rich in that kind of a market system, then of course there is a politics and a power play between them. You don't actually have an autocratic, those
Hmm.
people's power structures are putting the officers in the military and put
Exactly.
going into the party, and so. Really, the danger with China might be that it would go through this. Well, really, I don't think you can put a name on it. I think China, the history of China, calling it communism and thinking it's like what came out of Europe is
Hmm.
really
Yeah,
probably a misnomer.
far cry. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot
It's
better.
authoritarian, and I don't see what else they could have done. But at this point, the way America is spying on its own people, the outgrowth, the explosion of the black ops budgets and the kinds of things that we're doing. If anything, I think it's the U.S. and the European countries which partake in the same kind of stuff that
Exactly.
are. We're more in danger of a Nazi wave coming through and turning us into some abysmal place. Though obviously it's more free, and speech seems more free here than it is in China at the moment in certain
Hmm.
ways. But in terms of momentum and the fact that, oh, you have free speech here, supposedly, but then the FBI and the NSA are spying on you because you went and protested in a park for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
So how free is it? They're just hiding. They're just hiding their authoritarianism.
Yeah. Or you
But
mentioned the word terrorism a little too many times, and once too many. So
mhm.
yeah, it's a big problem. It's gonna be the yeah like what's his name? The beardy man like said, yeah, capitalism is gonna be the downfall of the United States, or the Great West. It's gonna be the downfall, and it's continuing to be the downfall. And you can see it actually today. A lot of things are a lot more expensive. Things that used to be okay, a few bucks now are continually more expensive than for example, like the oil. It's more expensive. The barrels of oil are
Mhm.
more expensive because again, we're paying for the war. It's
I know, and you remember how it
interesting.
was supposed to make it so cheap.
Oh yeah, yeah.
As a liberal, I'm like, hey, if you're going to go to war for oil, I'm going to go ahead and protest it. But when you get your way, at least come back with some oil.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember when I went to Maui. A gallon of freaking milk was like $10. I was like, "Are you
Yeah.
serious? It's ridiculous and it's insane."
Well, yeah, that's a whole other thing too
Oh
in
yeah.
Hawaii, because I just moved to Maine, and so of
Okay.
course I was in Hawaii
Figured.
for
Okay.
like 12 and a half years. But
Uh-huh.
the thing about Hawaii is you get used to, well, of course you're in the middle of the Pacific, so of course it's expensive. No, Asia is sending boats right across. They come from, even in the northern parts can come down there and go by. There's
Exactly.
no reason the gas needs to be a dollar more expensive and
Yeah.
stuff. It's just that they have you where they want you, and they forget when they're drawing the pictures of supply and demand and where the
Hmm.
things cross that there's the short hairs version too of
Hmm.
like, yeah, and then in Hawaii too, there's a kind of a shipping, because of an
Hmm.
era when it was hard to get people to ship there. They gave them a monopoly, and now there's very few shippers that are even allowed to send
Well,
stuff
that's it.
through there. And so, but anyway, one piece here and one piece here and one piece here, and it's like, yeah, $8 for a gallon of milk. Oh, and
Yeah.
by the way, we don't want to have dairies anymore. And so they're having it's just a weird thing because they also, so it's so expensive, you have to get everything there. Also, they're not manufacturing anything.
Hmm.
The boats don't come. There's no toilet paper.
Hmm.
There's not a backup paper plan, and there's
Yeah.
example after example, and it's kind of, I think it shows how our economy has to change. And if it takes government, then fine. And if it means you were communist, fine. If it means you're not, then as long as you're not a murderous kind of
Government.
philosophy,
Uh-huh.
then whatever it takes, because uh, they should have a way to make toilet paper, whether it doesn't run all the time or just as a matter of I don't know if you remember, like 10 years ago, and I was in Hawaii, and there was a ship worker strike was
Yes.
just threatened. It never happened. The Pacific, maybe it was a longshoreman or whatever. Boom, as soon as that happened, the stores sold out of everything. You couldn't get toilet paper. Literally, you're going around the 3 stores and you realize
Mass hysteria. Yeah.
it's not just that store is out, the island is out. And it's like, that's not really, how is that national security? I mean, they're reading our emails for national
Yeah.
security, and it's like, but if the boats can't come because a union wants to, do some hardcore negotiation, then we don't have
Yeah.
hygienic basics of modern society. So something has to happen, and capitalism misses that. It also, I was going to make some videos, I haven't got around to it, but when I was talking to Heitl today, I wanted to see if we go back and forth, because I'm tired of not talking about the distribution of wealth, and the time to be afraid of being called a class warrior is over. And I don't want to be a class warrior, and I don't think everybody should make the same amount of money, but that distribution, that 90% is owned by the top 10%.
Yeah.
These are real numbers. And when you think about it, you could be pretty rich, you top 10%, and have only 70%, and that would make everybody else 3 times richer. Three times
Exactly.
richer. it's hard to say how we would have economic problems with the schools or safety or really anything if everybody was just 3 times richer,
Hmm.
to me.
Hmm. What do you think
So what are you
about?
going to do about that?
Yeah. So what do you think about meritocracy as a functioning system? Say
Yeah,
you're paid what you're worth. That would be fair, but at the same time, that will not be fair for the lower class, for the people that didn't have the time to go to school because responsibilities.
yeah,
So what do you think about meritocracy as a functional system, government system, to increase,
right.
uh, to
Well,
balance the imbalance of commodities? Because
I
there's an
basically
imbalance
think
in
there's no such
distribution, right?
thing as a meritocracy, basically. It's just a thought experiment. And the thing is,
Exactly, exactly.
I thought through it a lot, and it's like, well, okay, in a meritocracy, who runs the U.S. Tennis Association? The best tennis players? No, that's not necessarily the best person doing the
Yeah,
behind the scenes. And so, so it's kind of like that's the problem is that, and even when you have a system, um, well, I used to think the problem with the meritocracy, because I spent many years trying to figure out how could you actually have one,
yeah,
and I kind of came to well, it's sort of the wrong dream because it's not the way to be healthy. Looking for the fountain of youth won't make you more healthy, kind of thing. But the
yeah.
other thing, when I was still more hopeful, was that it seemed to me like people climb a lot of systems for merit, right? Because whoever's ranked number one, that's merit, that they're
Hmm.
number one tennis player. That really is
Right.
the merit part. So even when you do have systems where people climb on merit,
Yeah,
because of human nature, there's reputation, plus we
yeah.
take experience into account. It means we overlook a few mistakes we wouldn't have overlooked when they were getting up there, which is a
Hmm.
detriment to the merit. And so I thought the problem was that people establish reputations and then they live off the reputations. And now I still believe that, but I think there's reasons for that. As I get older, I understand why that happens. But it's another reason you can't have a meritocracy, because even if you were sharp back then, well, that doesn't mean right now you've got it all
Sure,
together.
sure,
Maybe you knew
sure.
what was going on in the 60s and you played the game right. That doesn't mean you're. So there really kind of isn't a merit. And I believe in market. Like the American the Obamacare version, I don't like single payer. I want there to be a market. I don't think this one was necessarily designed ideally, but just that part of the principle, I like the idea of competition. I mean, my ideal thing is you have the government not putting that standard option, not single
Hmm.
payer, but a standard option. And then that means everybody else has to offer that or better. And I kind of feel the same way with about meritocracy, just roughly speaking, in terms of like you were mentioning of, um, uh, everybody doesn't get the same, but some people are going to get less because it's frankly it's easier to find somebody to do that kind of job, or it's actually
Exactly.
kind of zen cleaning up the park, so you're not going to get $150,000 dollars a year, and if you're a
Hmm.
doctor, well, you're going to get the money that it takes so that you don't have a flat tire on the way to surgery, and that's all fair if there's this standard option kind of idea.
Exactly.
Like the government would have to offer jobs. Yep, we got jobs, and here's what we pay the minimum wage. You don't have to make
Hmm.
anybody else pay a minimum wage. It's like, hey, you're cleaning the parks. We need the parks done. That's all. There's always plenty of jobs. I mean, I would go into
Hmm.
the making park paths and everything. Make
Yeah.
not make work that was useless, but all the long list of things that'd be nice to have fixed up. Let people do that. And if you set a baseline, then I like the
Yeah.
market
You set
system.
a
Go out
standard.
there and
Yeah. You
whatever
set a
you can
standard.
charge, get it. Yeah, because that's the problem right now. Is it's we're in this era where you're my generation of, we're a generation after a promise where you really could go get a job. Maybe you were so-so with it, but you did it well, you learned it
Hmm.
well, and you did it, and you were carried through to retirement.
Exactly.
And you knew how much time you're going to be able to spend with your kids because of the kind of job it was, and you made some concessions. Well, that's not how it's ever been. We were,
Hmm.
I don't know about you, but
Hmm.
certainly in the era I was growing up, in the era where we were told that's how it worked. And
Hmm.
the only contrary position that I picked up as a Californian growing up in California was, yeah, but don't give in to that. Go become a rock star, follow your
Oh,
freak
yeah.
flag, and but not because the promise was a lie. That working hard for GM wouldn't be reliable. And now we're in this era where you can do all of that hard work for something uh, and get nothing out of it. Like the people at Enron. I mean,
Oh.
they didn't really do, and I mean the workers that had all their retirement. You know, these guys that
Mhm.
were about
Oh, yeah,
5 years away from retiring. They had a lot of people in Enron that started in Enron when working for a company like that was supposed to be, reliable, for lack of a better
Mhm.
word.
Yeah.
And they're investing in their retirement in their own company stock, which that's taking responsibility and betting on yourself and believing there was
Exactly.
substance there. It shows an honesty of what they were doing from their point of view. And then because of the corrupt leadership, these people ended up with
Yeah.
nothing. People that thought they had a million or two saved up from hard work, to retire and carry them to
It was
15
a hard
years
hit.
into their, that's not cool. And at time and time again, I mean, it's just, and the it has to be, I think it has to be a story told in terms of the distribution of wealth. You can't ignore,
Yeah.
these crazy kinds of statistics. The top 10% cannot have 90% of the wealth.
There has to be a
It won't
balance.
work.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
has to be a balance because the system will fail. Like as you can see, there's an imbalance, and the system is failing. So
But it's just a lack of of enlightened self-interest here, the capitalist idea, because I don't think people don't understand this, people that are very for that kind of system. I think they understand this, but they're not willing. All you need is a valve or something. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to
exactly.
be like philosophically the greatest thing in the world. You need a way
Hmm.
to distribute that back out, and they just want
Yeah.
to ignore that. And I think it is dangerous because the idea, sort of the European socialist idea, that you can balance it out by taking money and taxes and putting it back in
And
programs,
breaking.
that doesn't work because that leaves this hollow core. Like
Hmm.
myself, the kind of help I could have used in life, I've not um, needed that public assistance. So it's kind of a swirl around a certain
Hmm.
segment of, I think you have to invest in infrastructure, is what I think. When you buy roads, you build a bridge. If it really is to nowhere, believe me, somebody will build something at the end of it. And I don't want
Yeah,
to just
exactly.
build roads randomly, but infrastructure is a value. But so our system is, hello. Yeah. Oh, okay. So what? I'm live on the air. Live on the air. You want to hand me a written note like we were professionals or something? Anyway, sorry. Just my lovely wife trying to get my attention. And I'm talking too loud. I can
So,
talk less loud. I'm getting excited. But anyway, yes. So, yeah, on the economic stuff, I just, well, you like to talk about Malthus a lot. I mean,
hmm
economically, that means you just expect it to run out. And you kind of spoke like that earlier.
Yeah.
Basically, what you mean by that is it's going to run out. How can it not? But what if about steady population? What if we get steady population and it doesn't, or does it still run out because we
Well,
use too many
exactly. That's
finite
what
resources?
Malthus was trying to accomplish.
Yeah,
Like not eradicate the poor. That was a bad example, but
yeah,
just keeping it a balance. So, like for example, a balance in distribution and wealth. A balance. Just keep it a balance so that this infrastructure can function properly.
you
And
don't
it's
think there
not
can
functioning
be
properly.
renewable? That we have
I
renewables
mean,
that don't run
what
out?
resource is renewable? Well, we still haven't figured out a way to actually make energy. We could only harness the energy. We, I mean, we haven't figured out how to make water. We could only harness what's left. But the
Yeah.
thing is, how could we actually make energy, or how could we make water instead of just harnessing it?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. As soon as you started saying, that and we talked about making water or energy, basically, isn't it true that like all the energy is from the sun because that's what all those fossil fuels where the energy was collected and
Exactly.
stuff? Yeah. So just in principle, but then at that point you just get to run, you run the numbers theoretically, and you figure out if there's enough thorium to supply you. And anyway, it's sort of academic, isn't it? Because we certainly, I mean, it's not really. I mean, I
Hmm.
am getting on the wave of yes, I think we can have these sustainable
Hmm.
processes, but it's pretty much optimism of
Yeah,
the very
exactly.
hopeful sort. We've never seen
Because
that.
I mean, if
You
you
know,
look at the numbers, yeah, a lot less people are having kids. But if you look at the numbers, the actual numbers, how many kids are being born every day, it's scary. It's like 108 and 30,000. It's 140,000. It goes up and down, but it's ridiculous. It's like, I don't think we're gonna have enough maybe in 60 years time.
yeah,
Yeah, there's sources that we could there's actions that we could take. For example, plant new crops. But in order to plant new crops, you're gonna need land, and we're gonna push animals away up to extinction. Extinction. That's what happened to the dodo
yeah,
bird, right? So I mean, it takes a lot to make a
yeah,
lot. So we can never really find a way to make something. We could only harness
yeah.
what Mother Earth has given us, if you will.
Well, have you heard this? I mean, recently the UN and sort of the statistics of the curves of the growth, supposedly
Hmm.
that we've already got this baby bubble where there are more children in the world now than there should
Hmm.
ever be again, because basically everywhere around the world, with just a few exceptions, has dropped into the 2 point small
Hmm.
area, and the numbers look like they would level out and become a sustainable kind of number. You never know what's going to happen, right? You have one
Yeah.
generation starts having 6 kids, but basically there is some sort of momentum statistically to this stuff. Anyway, and so I think the current estimates are around 11 to 15 billion.
Billion,
What do you
yes.
think of that number? Because I mean, this is compared again when we were younger and in the 70s when you're looking just at that exponential and everybody's still having
Hmm.
6 and 10 kids around the world and you're talking about well,
Yeah,
to
it's
me,
ridiculous.
11,
Yes.
12 billion sounds great because we were told it to be 60, you know.
Yeah.
So, but what do you think of that number? Because it is still obviously a lot of people. I know people say
Still a
that's
lot of people.
already
It's still, I
big
mean, we
enough.
got to look at the resources as well. I mean, what
Hmm.
could the Earth actually sustain? What resources that we have that can be renewable? What resources that we have that, like, okay, we could support this number? For example, just in Thomas Malthus' time, the population was only a billion,
Yeah,
and it only took just a little bit to make it up to 7 billion. It's scary, and the way the population is growing is growing a little bit more. But at the same time, if you look at the statistics, a lot of people are having less babies, but because a lot of people are being more educated and stuff.
yeah, but this is the good side. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, go
exactly.
ahead if you want, but this is the good side of this, of what we've seen happen
Hmm.
in 30 years. And the Peace Corps people, all of the, they've done good things, digging latrines, getting contraception, getting education out there. And they've found that educating women and having less child mortality, but
Exactly.
up to age 5 style, not just at childbirth, that has a natural result, and giving people more money has a natural result of people having less kids, which is kind of what I thought as a kid. I thought, well, they're having 10 kids because they need 10 people to help out,
Hmm.
and
Well, that
they're
was back in the
losing
days.
half of
Yeah.
those kids. They're
Yeah.
losing half of them to things like flus and stuff, that aren't
Yeah.
necessary. And
Or back
so
then,
it
cholera.
turns out that it really is true that you solve those problems. People don't want to have 10 kids. And
Hmm.
especially educating women, which is the funny part. They found you educate the
Hmm.
women, they don't want to have
Yeah.
10 kids.
Yeah.
So,
But if you, for example, if you look at the West, if you look at the West or Europe, educated women actually, educated women will wait for them to you be stable in a job. For example,
mhm,
will wait to graduate and be stable in the job, and then after 30, maybe, oh, you know what? I want a kid because I could support it, or they're being more educated in their decisions, and it's like, okay, I could support a kid here, and not only educating or educated women have less kids than, for example, the non-educated ones, the
mhm,
ones that have to eat to survive, if you will, the ones that work minimum wage because they could only get a job for minimum wage. And you know nowadays it's a two economy household because, hey, we're uh, middle class or lower class. they work two jobs and two incomes. Those, and so it
That's a
gets to the
funny
point
thing.
that yeah,
Well, we just kind of gone circle. I always try to look for these circles, and the way you think is I knew it would uh, this would be a good perspective. But so we just did a circle, and maybe just in my mind,
hmm
but around to you were talking when we were talked about um, responsibility and antinatalism and natalism is well, we were talking about that you ought to be able to have the resources, right? We started off with the
exactly,
financial
exactly,
resources, and yet it's the exact opposite that we see as really not a
yeah,
personal decision, but a law of nature,
hmm
right? If you're because you're talking about groups of people and these things shift, and the whole
hmm
group is reacting differently, almost like it's a law of nature to for us as animals, at least currently, to react opposite of like your advice or whatever you would if you'd call
Well,
it advice, but
yeah. The thing is that I read a book. I forgot what the name of it. I'll give you a link. It's about a paleontologist that did population statistics. And it said during extinction level events, but before like 100 years before that extinction level events, like a lot of creatures were having less babies because they felt that there's not a lot of resources, something's going to happen or whatever.
mhm.
That was his theory that when things change with the system, with the ecosystem, when things change, we adapt to that. Like, well, okay, there's not a lot of resources, we should stop because there's not going to be a lot of resources to feed and take care. So people stop and create that balance. And so, yeah, that was the theory he had. I forget what's his name. Damn, Wilson? E.O. Wilson, I believe? No, that's not E.O. Wilson. Yeah, I'll think of the name.
It wouldn't necessarily contradict what's happening to humans, but um, it does seem to me there's a possible positive picture there and a path to take, and that if we can successfully create a standard of living, then people will naturally some of their natural reactions, unlike people who usually just screw up anything good.
hmm
There's some of these reactions at least are positive, but it's not so easy as just like um, give everybody stuff for free or whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
there's definitely a trick to it. How do you like what do you use as a meritocracy or as close enough or as how do you put the bottom in? Because you don't really want to say, well, here's the bottom and we'll just push you up. What you want to do
Yeah.
is make it easy enough to get the things that you need so that you have to go get them,
hmm
but you can get them, you know, and you know, and then somehow, hopefully, your system then, you know, you don't want to have to reboot all the time. Oh, it's another time for reboot. You want the system to keep
hmm
running. And it
You
seems
keep
like with
running, exactly.
capitalism, there's this, you know, boom and bust things a lot like,
hmm
well, we just reboot it then. What do we do when the money gets too much up here? It
Yeah.
blows up and a bunch of
Blows
new
up.
people get the pieces and then it
Exactly.
goes up again. And we have, you know, if we're
Yeah.
lucky, sometimes we have 300 years and that won't quite do. But, well, I'm kind of being warned that I'm sort of loud. So people are going to sleep around
That's
now,
fine.
and I should go. But I would like to
Yeah.
talk to you again. I don't feel like
Yeah,
we got.
definitely.
So okay, well let's make a tentative plan to talk again.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
definitely, there was definitely some other stuff. Like I said, I came in with no agenda of what I wanted to talk
Yeah, me
about. But
neither.
part of the reason was because I had so many things that might have gone on that list. I said I don't do this so that I can worry a lot about that many details. So,
Yeah,
but as a
one more,
result, we definitely there's things I'd like to talk
yeah,
to you about still.
yeah, definitely. One more thing. You said
Sure.
in your latest video, because I saw, because I was posting, in your latest video, you said you were looking for what kind of because you're looking for an infrastructure, right? You're creating a program.
Yeah, I'm creating a program that I mean I really have wanted to do since I started programming. So we're
hmm
talking like 30 years ago. But in the last 5 or 6 years, I've written a lot of prototyping code. But basically, it's structured conversation rules. So You know, I made the, if I don't know if you remember any of these steps, but I had made some videos where I was using, and I did share the link, but it was just a prototype of to make replies to videos based on time
Okay.
code, and then you could
Uh-huh.
seek and stuff. And I have a new subscription thing. And basically, you know, if I went back to when I was 13, it's like I want to have a piece of software that does
Mhm.
Robert's Rules of Order. And basically, I'd like to have something flexible enough so you could have something really structured, like, you know, like a House of Commons uses, or you can have something that's just slightly structured, like a couple guys talking about sports would want to use. But in that case, it still provides a structure and leaves a trace of the argument. So, in what we're starting with is, and I say we because there's some other people, but it's all my code now. Is
Mhm.
the response? If you, it's a Chrome extension, and if you
Okay.
add it, then you can add responses again
Okay.
and see other people that have added
And you're using
responses, and
Java
that's
for
just
it, right?
no JavaScript.
JavaScript, yeah.
And
Okay,
then
so
Python on the back end. But I
uh,
write a lot of it in JavaScript
mhm.
because it's really gotten mature. You can make full-on clients, right,
Okay.
in 3D and everything if you wanted to. So I'm doing as much there, which is kind of neat because then the people's browsers are spidering YouTube as a result of them going and interacting with
Mhm.
YouTube, as opposed to me putting a spider like Google does on
Yeah.
their own server that goes out and contacts everybody. It's
Mhm.
just like, no, instead, the people using the extension, so I really like this model using the extension, go to the website, they get some information that they can share, you know, or not, and we'll be able to both control their contribution and also aggregate everything, you know.
Oh,
So and so yeah, I hopefully if I can keep working on it, I think there's a few years until I have kind of the whole suite.
yeah, the
But
infrastructure.
right now it's up as an app, but you have to have the link, which I posted the
Okay.
link in some of those videos because it's just an early release.
Okay.
Like I'm working on logging in. At first I was playing with the idea, forget it, you don't even have to log in, but there's some reasons a conference report convinced me. And so there's a couple features before I want to release the first version,
Okay.
but it'll basically just be a response tool with various summary screens I don't have there, and then we'll release it. It's already all on GitHub, actually. It's going to be open sourced. The client
Cool.
is open source. The server, I'm not ready to open source that, but it communicates with JSON, and somebody could easily have another server that it talks to, because all the server really has to do is give you data that's, you know, it's like there's a reply, it's storing the reply so
Mhm.
other people can see it, but you know, that's trivially, that doesn't take
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
CPU or programming to get it to do that. So
Okay, cool.
but yeah, so do you program? I forget if we've talked about
Yeah,
programming. You sound like a
some
programmer.
PHP, some
Oh, really?
some what do you call this program? I forgot. Ruby on Rails.
Oh, really? Yeah, I
Yeah,
liked that. I
yeah.
that was a system I learned just
PHP. So yeah.
because I liked Ruby on Rails. I didn't end up liking Ruby, the syntax. It's a great
Oh yeah.
language, but just the begin and end stuff. And
Mhm.
basically, Python's very similar, but Ruby on Rails was great because they
Yeah.
use naming convention and all that stuff just right. That
Yeah,
everybody
and it's
in the
excellent for
web,
the backend.
that, oh my God, that's awesome. Yeah, for
Yeah.
the backend,
Yeah,
definitely.
it's excellent for the
Well,
backend.
pretty much all of the systems, like Python, was like,
Mhm.
we should have something like that. So basically, Ruby on Rails, it did stay around. So it
Mhm.
became a success for Ruby, but also it spread out. Everybody's adopted that
Yeah.
model, and
Yeah.
automatic naming between properties and into the database. Though nobody's done the pluralization thing. That's
Okay.
Ruby's
Cool.
own. You get to have your own little silly things.
Okay, so you're
But
gonna make
yeah,
it
so
yeah. So you're gonna make it Android friendly or Apple
well,
friendly?
my idea for that, I made an Android app. Again, it was a thing just I do to see what's involved. And I haven't made an iOS app because I didn't want to pay 200
Yeah.
bucks and learn Objective C. But my
Well,
idea right
Cocoa
now is
script,
the H.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Oh yeah, you could use
yeah.
CocoaScript. Well, anyway, my idea right now is the HTML5 and JavaScript is getting very
Mhm.
mature, and
Yeah,
basically it's
definitely.
the point where you're even going to have touch events and things like this are
Mhm.
getting into the browsers. So I'm expecting to be able to write the smartphone versions of this this app or any other apps in
Mhm.
with basically with the browser front end, and you can make it so it barely looks like it's running in a browser. But if it's not a 3D video game, it should be animated and smooth and have fade-in effects and all of that stuff
Mhm.
people expect. So, because I really don't want to make, I mean, on the Android, you have to program in Java,
Yeah,
which Java's fine, but I'm
exactly.
not the biggest fan of it.
You
And
can actually use also C++ or what do you call
can
that?
you know?
Objective C, I think.
Well, that's on the iPhone.
Exactly.
On the iPhone, you have to use Objective-C. Now, you mentioned CocoaScript, and there are some
Yeah.
other things, but
Yeah.
basically at the programmer level, Apple still prefers and uses Objective-C, but they were the only
Mhm.
one that followed that fork. And so, yeah, I like working in Python. C++ is fine, but less and less need for that because there's just not that many computationally intensive things that have to be done day to day anymore, you know. So I'm a big fan of, uh, of Python,
Python.
and then
Python's good. Python's
accelerating it
so
with
good.
C++.
Because it's always growing. Python's always growing. So yeah.
Yeah, it's in there. It's doing pretty good,
Yeah.
you know, and it runs pretty fast and stuff. Java's still theoretically faster because they put a lot of work into optimizing the Java virtual machine. But I
Mhm.
just got to think it's dead now. I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe the open source version will. I mean, I just can't. I don't know if you follow this stuff. Sorry, but how much
Oh
you
yeah,
do.
yeah,
But
totally.
Oracle bought Sun, and as I just can't see
Mhm.
Oracle keeping Java going the way Sun had. It's not the
Yeah.
same kind of company, the reputation, and so we'll just have to see. But I wouldn't mind if it went away. But there's so much heavy metal invested, you know, in big operations that did use the Java and the J2EE or whatever it's called
Mhm.
for the server that stuff doesn't just go away. So, but anyway, yeah, and I'd like to do this open source and uh, yeah, I don't know if well, if you're interested, yeah, just
Yeah, definitely,
watch and
definitely.
because there's also just voting and it's all on GitHub. I haven't really published. Well, I mean, I have actually. If you, I put the GitHub link up for people that are
Okay.
testing it as
Cool.
well. And GitHub's cool because it's got I don't it's you know it's got all the
I'll try it.
code,
I'll check it
it's
out.
got an issue, and it's got a wiki so people could philosophize or help
Yeah.
add code or whatever they wanted. So, all right.
Yeah, because I also want to find a way to just overwrite that code and put that data response back to YouTube. But
Mhm.
we'll see.
Well, this is the thing, and I even talking when I talk to Gary, because Gary does a lot of JavaScript programming, is that
Mhm.
this stuff I'm doing in the client is open source, and I have a history professionally, so I think I can say I know how to do it, of making toolkits and development toolkits. So making things in pieces that are reusable. So sort of that's another part of this idea is that you know, other people can make other tools for totally different purposes. And really the whole domain is structured conversation, ways to, you know, put a topic on the table or to not have a topic on the table, but
Mhm.
summarize your response. There's a lot of ways to structure it.
Follow
And I
through, yeah.
think the time has come. You know, a lot of us have been doing this for years. And I started this kind of text talking philosophy online at 13. So I've seen a lot of these 6 year cycles where after
Yeah.
6 years, you're like, we're talking about the same thing, and you know what, that could be okay if there was at least like a log of what we had said already so that the next
Mhm.
time through we don't make the exact same mistakes, or
Exactly.
worse yet, some newbies just started talking about atheism and they're making the same mistakes and nobody's learning from anybody else.
Exactly.
And
It should be a system like Amanda's doing a database to put that
yeah,
script on and recall or
yeah,
rollback.
exactly. You know,
Yeah.
and I want to integrate with things like that, and there are a lot of other people doing cool tools, and I really also there's a community conference report was telling me of it's a Facebook group or something of people that develop YouTube related stuff, you know, and
Oh,
then
cool.
there's a Facebook group or maybe a G plus
Yeah.
group, and I really should get in touch with that because that's the idea with software, and we're kind of at this era where you don't just make something and it has to be all everything talks to each other. It's a very
Yeah.
exciting time because this is a time when you can make a little tiny something that you think is cool and it
People will.
integrates itself with everything
Exactly.
else. It's not just out on its own. You don't have to do everything from scratch. So so yeah, okay, well, all right, well, we'll be in touch then. Yeah, I'd like to
Oh,
talk to you
definitely,
again. We
definitely.
should
Yeah,
next couple of
send me
weeks
a
try to do
PM
another
or
one.
yeah, definitely. Be cool
Okay,
to talk
cool.
again.
All
All right,
right, Jesus.
take it easy.
All right, take it easy. Bye bye.
Bye.